Yo, and welcome
Hey,
everybody to Fake Whale. We got Metageist today. Lee here with us. Welcome, man.
hey, nice to be here. Thank you.
How you doing today?
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, I've just been
Yeah,
setting up a new studio space.
right
Out.
on.
I've been working from my own room here for about 3 years, and I've just been building desks and stuff and moving into a bigger space.
Good for you. Congratulations. That sounds exciting. And you're located in London?
Yeah, kind of just about an hour out of London, in a kind of a bit of a rural area in a small city, but nice easy connection. So yeah, it's pretty
Right
good.
on. And so that just leads right into to where I wanted to begin because when I read your bio, I saw that you were the MC for Proof of People. Is that right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I was there. It was the Proof of People was awesome, and that means that I actually listened to you speak quite a bit without putting this all together until reading that bio. But I watched most of those panel talks. I was on one of the panel talks, and then
Yep.
I watched most of them because they were actually really really interesting. But you like emceed that whole thing, and then were you on a panel as well? Maybe a few, or maybe did you
No, not really. No, not really.
did you
I
moderate?
basically, yeah, I was helping just moderate and yeah, just sort of chat between panels and guide people on and look after microphones and all that sort of stuff. I was sort of jumped in at the last minute to help them out because somebody else who actually I was with in New York a few weeks before had got COVID and couldn't travel from where he was. So I jumped in with like 2 days notice and emceed a 3 day
Hmm.
event, and it was yeah, it was. I mean, it was an amazing event, and I got like front row seats for all of those panel discussions, and it was curated so well as well. Like it was a real honor to be part of it, but it was intense. And yeah, I don't know if I'm going to MC a 3 day event again anytime soon, but it was nice to be there and be part of it. You see, it's a
I
certain
can't
type of
believe
energy
that.
that you need.
I can't believe that you had like 2 days notice and agreed to do that. That's wow. Wow. Kudos to you. That's incredible.
Yeah, there
So
was
do you
points of huge regret. I will be honest, because I was still getting over COVID as well, and I thought I was better. Like a lot of people had this where they thought they were better, and then they got like a second wave, and that's what happened during like the first day, and it was hard because I couldn't. You have to be witty, right? You have to
Oh yeah.
keep the energy up, and I had total brain fog but yeah, I really wanted to be part of it. I really wanted to like just support what Nicole and the team are doing because it's like they're the best sort of shows. They're the best things in the UK. I mean, NFT UK was just a complete shit show. It was rubbish, and and anything that Vertical Crypto Art do is so much nicer. So I tried to go to all the shows and support it. So it was really cool to be part of it.
So for anybody who wasn't there, not familiar, which most should be at this point though, it's that was 3 day event and it went from like it was an all day thing. It was like, morning, midday until like nighttime and it was stacked with panel discussions, like 8 or 10 or however many hours. And you were moderating the whole thing just to like put a little context around how much work that would have been because I know by the third day, at the end of the second day, I would have been like, oh my fucking God, I have to be back here tomorrow and do this again. So yeah, I totally understand, but it was a great event. You did a wonderful job. Like I said, I watched most of those panel discussions, and they were all very interesting. Um, so yeah, kudos. It was a fun event to be a part of. Do you have background in like emceeing or hosting events or doing podcasts or what does that connection? Why'd they come to you? Like, hey, will you do this?
Yeah, well, I mean, they just sort of put a shout out on Twitter saying like we desperately need somebody if we could jump in, and I just sort of said, oh, actually, somebody recommended me because I did do like a crypto art focused podcast for a bit with my friend Paradox Sam, and we interviewed Colby and Trevor Jones. Went to Trevor Jones' studio and stuff like that, and filmed them, and I
Well,
quite enjoyed that. But before that, I've got like 20 years experience of putting on like metal shows and being in bands and hosting punk shows and DJing and experimental and until COVID. Up until COVID, I was doing this like experimental club night that had like virtual reality and augmented reality and crypto payments and all that sort of cool stuff like holograms and things. In my small town, I mean, we'd be lucky to get like 60 people. It was a very small thing, but I've always really enjoyed I guess it's a case of when you're in a small town, like if you're into experimental and weird stuff, like, and the chances are no one else is going to do it. So if you want that to happen, you've got to do it yourself. Um, so I've just always done that, and I've really enjoyed sort of community building and working collaboratively with weirdos and trying to make like little events happen. Um, so yeah, but when it comes to sort of emceeing, I don't generally get on stage myself in live events. So that was kind of a little bit out of my comfort zone a little bit. But yeah, generally I've always been an event promoter, I suppose.
That's amazing. That's so cool to hear, and that's exactly what I was hoping to get into a little bit was like your background. I know that you've been, busy or active within certain communities and scenes for a long time, online and off. It sounds like now. That's cool. You said
Mm.
you were throwing metal shows and stuff like that. Was it mostly local bands and underground bands and
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah, mostly local bands. There was some bands that started off quite small that would tour the UK, and I'd get them in. Like we're talking like 100 quid a pop, like really sort of like low budget for me. Very shitty venue with sticky carpets and bad sound. Small intimate shows, maybe a couple of hundred people. I used to do all dayers as well, like hardcore and punk shows, like all day gigs. But I like did quite a few of those. And yeah, it was usually sort of like the heavier side of things. And then later on, I DJ'd and I made my own sort of like I guess Apex inspired, not like nasty electronic music for a while. I've still got an ambition to put on some more shows. In fact, that's something I'm focusing on now. One of the reasons I put the new studio is I want to do like a big party that has some like live bands and some live DJs and with a nice focus on sound as well in the future. But yeah, I just did that. It's just in my own town. I didn't really. I was in bands, but not really touring bands. They were always just small things that didn't last very long. But always surrounded by musicians, always in like house shares with musicians. And I was the guy that did the CD cover artwork. I mean, that's what I did for like 2 decades was album covers and posters and flyers and all that sort of t-shirt design, skateboards, all that sort of stuff. So it was always like part of the scene without very much musical talent. So I just filled all the gaps, built the websites and things like that.
I totally relate. Like we have a lot in common when it comes to that. All my friends are musicians. All my life, it's been my community. If I've never really had a community, but if I had one, it was like the music community. But the reason I say I don't have one is because I wasn't a musician, so I always was on the outside to some degree. But the same as you, I would get in where I fit in, be like album covers or tour merch and
Yeah.
posters and stuff like that. So I totally get it. That's why I was curious. It's so cool to hear. Actually, I feel like. There's probably a lot of us or you never hear much about the artists that are along with the musicians a lot, but I bet you
No.
there's quite a few of us. I think a lot of us are actually finding a home within like the more this Web3 space a little bit. I'm bumping into quite a few more because a lot of that art has always been not discarded, but like not taken seriously, I guess, as art, as art or whatever. People were just
Yeah.
seeing it as an accompaniment, I guess, to the music or whatever else it was. But now with this new focus on the artist and the digital space and stuff, the artist behind that work is coming into focus some. I'm actually finding that myself, so I'm sure you as well. I would love to hear about your more technical practice side of your aesthetics of where maybe your practice comes from, like what, because I know you're heavily into VR, but before VR I have to assume you were into digital work, and so I would love to know like how you were working digitally for these last 20 years and how that led into VR for you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I mean, I had an Atari in like 86, 87, and I had this program called Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit, and you could make your own top-down computer game. So that was the very first digital art I ever did. Um, and it's kind of weird that I never got into gaming or programming or anything like that. I always find it quite strange, but I did. I was always when I was a kid, I was always drawing all the time. I eventually went to school. There was very little creative stuff at school, but that was the only thing I was any really good at. I've actually very recently been diagnosed in my like early 40s with ADD, and everything suddenly makes sense now. Um, but yeah, and then I did graphic design at a really crap college. Barely sort of came out of it with very little experience, but I did get introduced to Photoshop. and then I just did. I loved Photoshop. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed photo collage and photo manipulation. And from like 19 or something onwards, I was sort of had this dream of starting my own company. And ambition didn't go far beyond just being a sort of a graphic designer and doing illustration commissions, because that's the only way I thought that I could sort of like tap into my creative energy and sort of pay the bills with it. And I ended up doing that. I started a graphic design company in my early 20s, like a sole trader thing, but that kind of did not go very well because I was way too young and way too stoned and way too into like graffiti and skateboarding and not into like holding down the job and getting the sort of clients. So I ended up bouncing around different work. I ended up working for Thomas Cook, like doing holiday brochures, and I spent like 5 years just making holiday destinations look better in Photoshop. But
Wow.
I was able, I was, yeah. So I was,
Sorry to laugh, but like,
that's
did you just
fine.
holiday destinations look better in Photoshop?
Yeah, so like I would literally make the skies blue. That was every single photo. But then I would use the rubber stamp tool to get rid of like green on the inside of swimming pools. I'd have to delete
Oh,
sunburn off of
wow.
people. I'd have to like delete football shirts and football towels because in certain brochures, if the wrong football team is in the brochure, people won't go to that holiday destination.
Yeah, I
Um,
get it, but that's just wow, what a hilarious job to have. I love it. That's amazing. What a
what was cool
cool.
about
Now
that was
every
though.
time I look at that shit, I'm gonna think of that. Whenever I see anything like that, I'm just gonna think about your job. That's amazing. Anyways, carry on. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, so it was. What was I going to say? Yeah, so during this time, my boss didn't know about Photoshop Actions, so I was able to like, and no one could see my screen. So for like 2 years, I was setting up an action to do all of that in the morning, and I was working on my album covers, and no one could tell. And I was building up a bit of a network of fans and stuff like that. And then eventually, I quit again, and then ever since then, that's like I've been solo freelance for 15 years now as a digital artist, and it was all Photoshop stuff. And in fact, just before I left, I even snuck because I've had the Metageist logo and name for that since then, and I even snuck the Metageist into the front cover of a Greek brochure. And he's like peering through a window in the brochure as just like a final like middle finger to the company before I left.
I love
And yeah,
that.
and I love Photoshop, and I was always like sort of interested in the 3D stuff, but it was quite sort of like slow, and I got so fast with Photoshop that I found it like quite intuitive, and I could find a flow state with it. But I couldn't. I found it quite hard to get into 3D because it wasn't fast, it wasn't instant, it wasn't intuitive, and it's still like a real pain in the ass.
Yeah.
But VR, like when I discovered VR, that was like 6 or 7 years ago now. I tested an Oculus and I had a go at Tilt Brush, and all of a sudden there was a way of doing 3D stuff that was instant and intuitive, and you could be in the art and you could like. So I find a flow state so quickly because you've got no distractions. I put on tunes and I just paint around me and just like make a huge mess and create these like immersive spaces, just kind of for myself to begin with. And then I decided I really wanted to make a career out of that. I wanted to get away from the sitting at a desk. I'd done Photoshop and InDesign and Illustrator and all this stuff for so long, and I really enjoyed this. The process of the VR painting was just so fun to me. I thought I wanted to make a career of it, and I started just teaching other people because it was really hard. There was no way of making money from your art like that. It was like literally no way. All you could do is maybe end up making assets for computer games or something. But then that medium in VR is not conducive to like optimized low file size models. It's like really messy and really high poly. So I was teaching in schools and I was teaching in youth clubs and I was teaching in universities. I was taking like a Tower PC and these like massive HTC Vive like sensors in my car driving around the country, just about sort of making a living like that. It wasn't super easy. It was quite tough. I was doing charity work as well in hospitals, taking it into the children's wards because I found that the whole thing was very therapeutic and it's very good for a sense of escapism. And I worked with old people, like 80-year-old women, and like just completely blow their minds with VR, and it was really fun. And I was doing festivals. I do live performances on stage with musicians. I did that a couple of times, and then it was lockdown, and then and then all of that stuff got cancelled. And luckily, I heard about crypto art at exactly the same time, and then I've just been doing that for 3 years now, like almost to the day, really. Just 3 years in the crypto art space, and I was able to sell VR sculptures and pay the bills with VR, with Tilt Brush and Gravity Sketch and these software that I use now. And so that's what I've been doing ever since. And it's just been, I mean, you know what it's like. It's been a roller coaster, but mostly it's just been amazing. It's just been a really good time.
That's amazing. Sorry, just like putting this all together a little bit because big span there, but one of the things that I really relate to that you were talking about was how intuitive you found Photoshop, because I felt the same way. I still do to some degree, and how non-intuitive all the 3D tools were or are, because I will try everything, like every single thing that I feel like might have a use. I download that shit. I try it for, a brief moment at least to see if there's something there for me or not. Anytime with 3D, it's always been like, fuck, like how do I even get to the point of doing anything at all? Like, like
Yeah, yeah,
I can't even start. Like, I can't even start here because I am a very intuitive working artist. I believe as an artist, artists should have tools that are intuitive because the more steps there are between you and the final product, like the more you lose in translation, I believe, like, so
yeah.
it's important that tools be intuitive, and that's really my hope with VR and everything. But like, yeah, what was I trying to use back in the day, or even still? Fuck, I'm not going to be able to try to remember them. But like all the popular ones. But
Studio Max or something like that, maybe.
yeah, I mean, I've tried them
Maya.
all. Yeah, everything. I have Blender on my computer right now just because it's
Hmm.
free and like everybody talks about
Hmm.
it. And I open it up, I'm like, I gotta put up lights and cameras and shit. I'm like, fuck, man. I don't even want to do that in real life.
Yeah.
You know? Um, and that's why I feel like programmers and stuff has always been the ones using those programs, and uh,
Hmm.
they're the ones that are hired to um, build the ideas of other people when it comes to video games, movies, CGI, right? It's not like the artists are the one coming up with it that's building this shit, because I don't think that's the same skill set necessarily. I mean,
Hmm.
a lot of people might disagree with that, and that might be like an unpopular opinion. But to me, to be really good at one of those programs and then also like a very flow state artist, like you kind of said, are two very different things, I feel like. Um, so
Absolutely.
like, and I feel like when it came to then the crypto scene or whatever, it was like a lot of the people who were not traditionally artists were trying to figure out concept all of a sudden because they never had to do that before. It was like, oh, we can make money selling this, but then they had no idea what to do because they were always told what to do. I still find we're in that. I still find that a lot of the OGs of the space are like not, conceptual at all. It's just like they've always been told what to do, and now they're at a point where like they don't have ideas. It's just like, not to get all whatever about that, but what I want to get into is the intuitiveness then of what you found in VR, because I'm still searching. I have an Oculus, and that's a big thing I wanted to ask you about. Like, you gotta help me out with things to use, and how you found them, I guess. Like, just give me like the lowdown on when you came into VR, like what programs, apps, and why, and how you found them intuitive to what you were doing already, maybe, like what were you doing and how
Hmm.
did these programs kind of bridge that for you?
Yeah, I think until I got jumped into the VR headsets, I wasn't. It'd been years since I'd created art for art's sake, and I wasn't sure like what I wanted to do. Before that, and so in the months before finding VR, I was more or less just, I wasn't doing any art for myself at all. I was just working with a bunch of clients. Some of them were like really dry, like corporate jobs. So they paid well, but it was a glorified art worker and things like that. Um, so when the first app I found was Tilt Brush by Google, and it's still around, but they basically stopped supporting it maybe a couple of years ago now. But you can still download it and buy it, and it's fun and it looks pretty, and it makes for like quite good sort of visuals if you want to do sort of live events and stuff. And it's definitely something I always recommend people jump into. But you can't really do anything too precise. There's nothing precise about it. It is like an experiential tool, really. It's loads of fun. But anybody of any age can just understand it. You just have a brush in one hand and a palette in the other, and you turn your hand round or twist it round to get the different tools, and it's just all there. There's no menus to worry about. There's no weird vernacular. It's all just taken from the real world. It's all just brushes and erasers and aerosols and things like that. That one's really good. And so when I sort of discovered crypto art, I saw Giant Swan was the first sort of VR artist I saw that was, and I saw him like sell a piece of artwork and it was on Instagram, and it was a few $100s, and that sort of blew my mind. And at that point, I was still using tilt brush, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I did know that I wanted to like actually not care what it was going to be. I just wanted to jump into the space. I gave myself like a whole evening, or like, and into the next morning, into the night, and just sort of draw and see what came out of my head, and then just put it up. I made a video from inside. You can sort of like film it from inside, so then you have like something that is sort of shareable for the internet. And I sort of created that and put it out, and it was just a very surreal little weird sort of creature riding something through space. And so a theme that actually more recently I've realized it goes back through all my sketchbooks. I've got sort of a mountain of sketchbooks, and there's often these sort of like little space travelers or whatever. But yeah, tilt brush is the one, and then gravity sketch is another one that's a bit more precise. It exports nicer files that are usable in 3D spaces. And then there's a new one called Paint VR, which is quite cool, where it's actually simulated paint that you can throw around and mix and put on big walls, and that's really cool. So it really has this tactile feel to it, even though you have got this box on your head and it isn't at all visceral really, but it has this sense of real paint. That's really fun to play with. And then there's a nice graffiti sort of simulator that's multiplayer. That's really surprisingly good. Like this simulation of the paint can, it rattles, the paint goes up wet, you watch it dry, it drips if you put too much on. And that's multiplayer as well, so you can just meet people on this like rooftop or in a subway and paint a train together, and then you can export images of what you create. So it's that's all really cool as well. All of those run on the Oculus Quest wirelessly.
The graffiti one is part of Paint VR, or
Oh no, the graffiti one is a separate one. It's called King Spray.
Cane Spray?
King, yeah, King as in the king and queen. King Spray.
Gravity sketch, can you do like 3D modeling and stuff in that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost all of my artwork that you'll see on Super Rare and Nifty Gateway and all that sort of stuff, that's all Gravity Sketch. So you can do sort of sketchy, painterly sort of things, but you can also create quite like bespoke shapes that then are understood by Blender or other desktop programs. So it's a really great starting point, and I've been using that consistently throughout, and it itself has also improved over the years, and that now has like a multiplayer thing, so you can get up 4 people in a space together and build and sketch and iterate. It's a really nice way of communicating in the third dimension with people. Like it's like having a 3D whiteboard all around you, and so you can get some really nice, interesting collaborations in there with like these intuitive tools. You can scale up and down. So you can create something in your hand and then instantly scale it up and get inside it. So there's a lot of fun to be had with scale as well in those environments, which is really nice.
Yeah, amazing. That's exactly what I needed to know. And all these are supported by Oculus, you said, and I ran into some kind of shit where I needed like to hook up a computer with it and all that shit, but this stuff is all like you just have the Oculus, you're good. What about
Yeah, exactly.
exporting?
Yeah, so you can export the Gravity Sketch is brilliant for that because it's got like this inbuilt like cloud save feature. So you can just save it in the app and then just log in on your browser and find the files. And then from the browser, you can convert to loads of different file formats, or you can just share the link with people and they can see the 3D model if you're collaborating or if it's for a customer or whatever. And then you generally, it depends on what you want to do with the output. So what I'm trying to do now, and what I really enjoy is creating things that are viewable in virtual spaces, 3D objects. If you want that to run on something like on Cyber or Spatial or Monoverse or any of these sort of 3D browser-based platforms, then you have to really think about file size. So then there is this like kind of cumbersome process of optimizing it afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get the hang of that, you can model it with that in mind, so you don't have any geometry that isn't really needed. So that's where you get past that really fun bit at the start of something, and then it's like finishing it off is kind of like less fun and kind of tedious. But once you understand the tools and find the right tools for that, you can make that a bit more of a sort of like a fun process in itself as well.
And I'm looking actually, I'm not trying to be impolite, but I'm looking at your work while we speak, that helps here. And I'm seeing, do you work much with photogrammetry?
I've done quite a bit in the past with it for my sort of experimental club nights and things like that, but I haven't touched it for a while. But I'm really keen to play with Nerf. I don't know if you've heard of those, but
Well,
they're
no,
like
I have no idea what you just said. Even did you say Nerf? I don't know.
Nerf, as in NERF. It's like neural radiance fields or something, and
What?
it's AI infused photogrammetry. So all of those sort of janky holes that you'd get doing photogrammetry, the AI
Yep.
like patches it up
Whoa.
on the fly, and you can do it
How
from
do you
your
do this?
iPhone. Yeah, it's just
How?
an iPhone. Luma.
Wait,
There's an
what?
iPhone app, Luma, Luma. I've never used it. I've just downloaded it, and I'm really keen to play with it. But I've seen some crazy stuff people are doing, because if from inside
Yeah.
the Luma app you can
Whew.
scan whole spaces, not just objects, but like a whole garden, a whole car park, a whole warehouse, and then you inside the app on the phone you can fly a camera around it and change the depth and all that sort of stuff and the
Shut
aperture,
up.
and
Wow.
you can
That's advanced,
export a
yeah.
finished video. It's really cool.
I've I mess with photogrammetry a lot, but I've never actually done anything where I've implemented it into like finished work yet or anything presentable work really, besides like, an Instagram video. Um, but I love it. I love photogrammetry. I find it to be like, I don't even find it to be 3D. I find it to be an evolution of photography, not of like
Yeah.
digital tools. It's an evolution of photography more to me. I want to find a way to collage using it, and there's no intuitive way yet. I found I've talked to people who do it, and they're like, "Oh, it's
Oh.
simple," and then they're like, you need this, 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 and then you use this program into this, and you got connected to the computer. And I'm like, fuck that. Like, it's not there yet. That's all I've realized.
I
It's
know,
not
I've
quite
got you,
there
man.
yet.
I know the pipeline for that. You want to use Luma or anything that creates these 3D objects, these photogrammetry files, and then you can use Gravity Sketch. So you can create your 3D assets, and it might be your phone booth or your car or whatever. Create them as separate assets. You bring them into Gravity Sketch, and you can have one in each hand, and you can just move them like real objects in the real space. You can just scale them, duplicate them, stretch them, and you can just place
That's
them in,
amazing.
and
Then
you
this
can
is
create a
exactly what
3D.
I needed. Because what
Yeah.
I've been doing is like I use what program do I use to do photogrammetry right now? Metascan, and then there's another one. And they do nice outputs and stuff. It's funny you say car park because I've actually scanned, the entire um stairwell of a car park, and it was dope. It was rad. I mean, full of holes, really shitty. I
Yeah,
like the
but it
shitty
looks
quality
great.
to
No, it
some
looks
extent.
great.
It's
Yeah,
dope. It's dope. And like to have a
I
whole
love it.
stairwell rotating. But Luma now sounds amazing. Gravity Sketch, I'm going to be downloading that. And I'm so sorry everybody for boring you with me just kidding. I'm getting a class from you like on this, and everybody gets to listen. But maybe other people are finding help in it.
Yeah, they will.
It's super exciting to me to hear this because really, like I was saying earlier, being intuitive or having intuitive tools as an artist, if you're like the kind of artist like me, it's so important because if I have a great idea and it's like it takes, X amount of time longer than I'm willing, it just goes away. I mean, the idea doesn't go away, it just becomes a huge impetus where it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, fuck it. I got other things to do that I can flow through. And that's a huge wall. So help like this and people like you that know the workflows like this, fucking huge. So I really appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of other people do. Let's talk more about your work though. I would love to talk like just about your world, because VR is all about world creating, and you're talking about working in three-dimensional space. And you certainly have a visual perspective, aesthetic that's your own. And I would love to hear about how you came up with it, or kind of what it represents for you. It's quite colorful in a lot of ways, a little playful in ways, dark still. So I think metal probably has something to do with it, and a lot of your, maybe even like the electronic scene. But give me a little bit of background on like your personal inspirations and what is driving the content, or the content in your work.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I sort of I saw this, I saw crypto art, I saw Spence, and I saw Twitter, and I saw the whole scene, and to me, in connection to what you said about like subcultures, it was like this cool little subculture, like international subculture, and I that's what pulled me in straight away. And I just thought, like, I'm going to take a risk on this. I'm bored of like trying to just teach VR, and I didn't want to go back into commissions and customers. And I thought, well, this seems to me like there's an opportunity here to just have some fun. So the priority for me was I was just going to have fun and do whatever I wanted and see what came of it. Um, so that was even down to the point where I never use like reference images, and I never really have much of a plan. All the things that I've created have been like improvised, in very, in sort of sessions, and while sort of like pondering where this technology is taking us in terms of like spatial computing and immersive technologies like VR and AR and AI and all these sorts of things. Um, so I had this like sort of thought that, yeah, the metaverse, for want of a better term, it's a word of say, but that is like, feels like if this the spatialization and the blurring of reality, and this spatial internet it feels inevitable, and it did, and it has done for ages. And I'm inspired by nature more than anything. I'm inspired by animals. I'm fascinated by
Mm.
the animals, especially the animals that don't get much attention. The animals that might make other people recoil. I love like the giant squid. I love the cuttlefish. I love the praying mantises and the spiders, and I'm all about like and reptiles, and I'm fascinated by evolution, and evolution of and epigenetics as well, about how like we change what we pass on to our offspring by the way we behave in our lifetime. And evolution of things like how does a plant evolve to become a trap for an insect? How do these there's a creativity to evolution, and I'm excited by that. I'm fascinated in the simulation theory as well, like about how you can't disprove that we're living in a simulation, and collapsing the wave function, like through our journey through life. Like it seems to be that there's that nothing exists until it's witnessed. So like, are we just writing things into existence as we move? So I sort of I ponder all these things, but then I'm using 3D tools that I'm really new with. So I've got like these kind of like playful, naive characters, but the idea is that they basically, over time, there's a bunch of stories, there's a bunch of strands behind these sort of 8 or so characters. And so I've got things called Metafiler, which are little ropey little cartoon animal things, but there's like two series of them, and the second series, all the same characters have evolved and become a bit more complex, and they've got a bit more personality. And then there's a third evolution of them, and one of them's become a fully immersive monoverse space. And so these little things are supposed that are sort of inspired by the Cambrian explosion and like early life on Earth, and I see them as early life in this potentially open metaverse, this new space, this new 3D space, and I see myself as a conduit for future AIs. Really, I'm inspired by animals. I'm putting them into the metaverse. They're not like the apes and the teddy bears and the animals that everyone else seems to focus on. They're referencing animals that are being destroyed in their billions as we destroy the planet, and they don't get any attention. And they're going to evolve. And all of these things, even the most colorful, like bright, silly, cutesy looking things, they're all kind of quite insidious. They're kind of like uh I don't think that I think that I'm going to be like putting AI into them. I want them to have, like, to become NPCs in a virtual world that I'm going to continue to develop, and that's going to be what I'm working on is this broad concept, and all of my pieces are they all sit and they're all going to be in this space, and they're all related to each other, and I want them to be free running and be able to evolve as AI and NPC technologies evolve to the point where some of these eventually will have personalities. And then there's like sculptures with utility as well, and they are like portals, but they're inspired by carnivorous plants, and that's because I feel like just especially at the moment with AI, we're sort of like marching onward into this like new halo, I don't know, this horizon, this beautiful new like space that everyone thinks is the next paradigm, without very much sort of contemplation about whether we should. So I've got these portals. All of my portals have teeth, and all of my portals have eyes, and all of them could snap shut behind you. So that's kind of a like meandering answer, but it's really just trying to create the bedrock for my own life forms in this space, while trying to communicate that I'm actually, as much as I'm really enjoying all of this, I'm not entirely sure it's good for us. So it's kind of like an internal battle with like what do I want to do, and how much of this is being fed through like expectations of people around me, um, yeah, that's kind of roughly where I'm at. I think. If that made any sense at all. I can't hear you.
Sorry, man, I was on mute because I was coughing. Didn't mean to be. Yeah, trying not to be impolite. Still getting over this little bit of a cold here, so apologies, everybody. But
No worries.
I've been looking at your work as you speak, and looking at these like creatures. You know, they're very cool. Very simply, just a stupid question: how are you making these again? Are you making these with like um, what you said,
Gravity
gravity
sketch.
sketch and knife? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. They're all just like painting in 3D space.
They're really cool, and like the ones that change a bunch and stuff. I'm looking at something like from, well, I guess a couple years ago even, that were on Nifty Gateway. But I'm thinking that these are kind of these little organisms that evolve that you're talking about and can evolve.
Hmm.
I love what you're talking about, inserting like AI into them, having like to me it almost sounds like you want to have like an aquarium online or something
Yeah,
that like these beings in it that have their own personalities and shit. Sounds dope. I mean, that sounds
yeah.
a lot of fun. Um, Okay, where do I go from what you all said here? Because I mean that directly almost leads into simulation theory, which is something that I think is so fun to think about. And like you said, like there's no way to disprove it. And one time I heard, I don't remember where I heard it, but it was just somebody simply said like we're gonna have the ability with our computing power in this reality, in this whatever dimension, to run a simulation of the world from the time of evolution and then see what happens. And we're going to be able to run simulations of things that already happened in different ways to see how the outcome would have been different in history and shit. We're going to be able to do this soon with our own computing power. And when we can do that, we are certainly going to do that. Why wouldn't we do that? That's, we're going to love to do this. Okay,
Mm.
so take that and now just extrapolate like who's to say that it didn't already happen? And we're living inside of one of those. And that
Hmm.
blew my mind. Like that was like the simple explanation that was just like, well, yeah, fuck, and then you talking about I'm gonna put AI in these creatures, and it's like, well, fuck, are we the evolution of a creature that somebody like you made, whatever? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It just it's endless to think about. And there's um this silly little personal thing of mine, and I'm sure maybe other people have spoken about it, but this idea that as a photographer, I've observed patterns, or I observe patterns a lot, and you observe the same patterns at a micro scale and at a macro scale. When you're in an airplane and you look down at a mountaintop, you see the rivers and tributaries flowing down, and it looks like the veins inside of your own body. All these patterns are reused over and over in nature. And that's just one example that's very widely used. Trees, even, mycelium and mushrooms, it's all the same. Um, and there's all these patterns. And I've had this silly, funny idea of like in video games, not that I'm a big gamer, but there's that concept of or procedural generation. And then
Yeah.
this idea that a video game has a limited amount of space that you can program. So they reuse patterns to regenerate. And so when at a certain point, I started putting that into like these patterns are reused because there's only a certain amount of bandwidth in our simulation. So like the programmers were like, just use that pattern for all these things, put it in the bodies, put it
Yeah.
on that's how the rivers work,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
so like I put this all together and I'm like, well, yeah, fuck it. Well, why not? Why aren't we? Like, I'll go with it, I'm not putting it out. I would love to hear your take on simulation theory and if it's similar or just like, yeah, just in general, because you brought it up and I love just the concept.
Yeah. It's like I do a lot of like listening to sort of like Lex Friedman interviews and things like that with people far smarter than
Hmm.
myself, and I hope to absorb it. I can never sort of regurgitate the info, but I hope to absorb it like through osmosis and get some sort of idea of where we are in terms of like what is consciousness, what is life, what is the universe, and there's this theory that like consciousness permeates everything, right? And panpsychism is the term, and I think that's really fascinating to think about, and that things don't exist. Like we only see like 0.06 of the electromagnetic spectrum with our eyes. Like the red, green, and blue is just a tiny sliver of reality. Um, and then beyond that, there's just so much more that we don't experience. And some animals experience these things completely differently. Like birds see in ultraviolet, insects see in ultraviolet, the mantis shrimp has got 7 cones in its eyes, and we've got 3. So like, fuck knows what that experience is like. Um, but yeah, so in a
Yeah,
sense,
no shit. I'm sorry to interrupt real quick, but like, does all the knowledge about like all these insects that you just named, that's fascinating, does that come from your artistic research into things, or is that something that it's independent of it that came first?
yeah, it comes first. It's just I just I don't. I mean, I spend a lot of time on Twitter more than I'd like to admit, but like generally, but I like to absorb. I try not to absorb too much junk information. Like I don't pay any attention like to consensus reality or like mainstream news cycles or any of that. And maybe that's ignorant, and it kind of is. But like I'd much rather listen to some like expert talk about like how like the details that you can see in a locust wing in a slow motion footage as it takes off from the ground, or like the fact that starlings, like the bird, the starling can like it's got 2 different eyes. It's got like one for looking out like it's like distance and one looking down for food and macro and things like that. That's why they switch their heads back and forth. Plus they see in ultraviolet, so when you see a starling, it looks kind of rough. It's kind of got that mirror sheen, but to another starling, it's like bursting with color. Um, and I'm a scuba diver as well, and I really like I've seen cuttlefish and octopus up close, seen the chromatophores and their skin change and the way they change colors and all that sort of stuff. And I just think like everyone loves to talk about UAPs and aliens and things like that, but like we're surrounded by like insects have like whole societies, like alien societies. Leaf hoppers communicate to each other with like a Morse code drumming through the part, like the branches that they sit on, and and like AI, it's like someone's putting AI to try and understand dolphins and all of these like different perceptions that just really interests me. And I've got concepts for avatars and our future artworks that are very, very heavily inspired by these sorts of ideas. Um, but yeah, so like the idea is that we all sort of swim through our own simulation because we know for a fact that we're only sort of getting these 7 signals, six signals to our brain based on our senses, and there's so much more out there. Um, and there's the idea that like light is a particle until it is witnessed, then it becomes a wave. So maybe as anything that isn't being seen and understood by an entity, by a consciousness, just doesn't exist. And then when an entity goes back to looking in that direction or traveling out to that part of the solar system or going down into the microorganisms or the like the structure of a leaf or whatever, as we look, what if we are creating it as we travel? And that's why there's always going to be another layer of complexity, no matter how small we go and no matter how far out into space we go, there's always going to be like another layer of complexity because we're writing it into existence as we move in the same way that when you run around in a computer game that's generative, the landscape pops into existence as you move around it, and until that point, it didn't exist anymore. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's not
Exactly,
like
exactly.
I
That
know anything, but I just find it so exciting. I just think maybe it's all nonsense, and maybe it's because we just anything we don't understand, we associate it with our current technologies. Like people used to think that human bodies had like plumbing and there were like cogs inside us. It was the equivalent of like what's on the outside must be on the inside. And so I do think maybe simulation theory is just because of the way technology
sure,
permeates everything. And maybe maybe it's maybe again it's incredibly naive, but you can't disprove it. And then I love the idea that maybe we are inside an AI. We are just it running it running it billions and billions and billions of like simulated life forms to try and understand what it would be to be, I don't know, like a point of consciousness out in the world.
I love it.
I
I mean,
don't know.
I love all this stuff. This is the kind of stuff that inspires a lot of like my thinking too. Like when I just whatever wander off and think about things. This is kind of stuff that I like to think about too. I as well am not that interested in, as you said, I use the same term, consensus reality. I love that term, but yeah, like all that stuff is far more interesting. I love how passionate you seem to be about animal life, and then in those kind of alien societies, as you put it, which is beautiful. It is also fascinating. And then the way that you brought up the procedural generation, um, that's exactly what I was thinking when you were talking about it, about how like wave, the collapse in the wave function, as you said,
Hmm.
things aren't, like not existing until we witness it, is the same as in a video game. Like, you're flying a spaceship and the space in front of you doesn't exist until you're there, type thing. And it really reminds me of the idea of like infinity and what that actually means. Um, and how what's interesting to me about infinity, or the concept of infinity, is like that edge of infinity and how it doesn't actually exist. You would like we can't even fathom what that means really, or like, but to me it's exactly what you said. It's just that there is no edge. It's that we constantly exist at the edge of infinity, and we're producing more as we go, and that's why infinity exists. Like we are the infinity in some
Hmm.
sense, or something like that. But if I don't mean to go too far into that, but I'm right on the page with you, as far as all that's going, and I find it so interesting, and especially how it ties in with all that you're doing. It makes so much sense. Like does that just like overwhelm you sometimes? Or
Yeah,
I mean,
the
because for me
main
I just have to be like, oh fuck it, at the end, like I start thinking about it and it's like, oh fuck, never mind.
yeah. Yeah, my main sort of thing that I don't know if you go through this as well, but I know a lot of artists do, where you just go through moments of like huge. I mean, I have imposter syndrome every waking hour, but I also go through periods of just like really like being not liking my work and being embarrassed by my work, and it bounces back and forth. But it is overwhelming. But my main thing really is that I don't think I communicate any of these sort of ideas or concepts with my art very well, because I'm using tools that are still quite new to me, and I also have like a short attention span, and it feels like, how else can I communicate this without, unless I just keep putting things out there, and then eventually there'll be a point where I'll be able to open the portal, and everyone and people can come see it and be like, oh, this is what he's been doing. And I think like, so it feels like it's going to be a very long time, and I'm dedicated, and I'm here for and I'm not going anywhere. I can't imagine doing anything except make art and try and share it with people, and be part of the whole crypto art scene, and part of that sort of beautiful circular economy that still sort of survives behind the noise. And hopefully that will sort of allow me to continue with this. But yeah, it is overwhelming, because I mean, as you can tell, I can't even really sort of get to like a point when I'm talking about it really. But I just hope that in the long term this thing will start to sort of manifest, and I'll be able to sort of like have people have experience, and and have an immersive experience that really sort of gets some of these ideas across. I would really love to be able to sort of walk around in some vast space that's populated by my sculptures and architecture and little life forms and avatars and things like that, that does write itself into existence as you walk around, and does, depending on what you say or do or who you're with or whatever, new things pop up. And there's quite a lot of pieces of mine that are based on that. But if you don't read the descriptions, you would never know that that's what I'm trying to say, really. So that's something that I sort of struggle with. It's like these huge ideas, and then you've got like a jellyfish on Nifty Gateway that's $60, and it does, and it's like, it doesn't really quite communicate what I'm trying to do. But the jellyfish has already evolved twice. There's three artworks, and it will continue. Um, but yeah, and I've got these images in my head of these characters I really want to do, and it's much more grainy and monochrome, and they're just sort of like pushing through like a desert at the edge of a simulation, and there's like millions of microscopic voxels that are like manifesting as they move, and they're like the soothsayer, and they're like seeing the things as it happens, and they're the vanguard and the pioneers, and um, but yeah, it's only me until next week when I actually employ two people in the studio. It's only me, and 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 like I say, like the tools I use are kind of quite slow, and I don't. I'm learning Blender and I'm getting better at Blender, but it takes like a month to get a short 10-second loop animated to a point where I'm happy enough to sort of share it with the world. And I'm starting to think that actually my creatures that I did 2.5 years ago, they're supposed to be AIs. They're supposed to be like representative of AIs in the simulation. So I think I just really need to keep my finger on the pulse and pay attention to these AI tools and see if I can find a way of using them where I'm still confident that it's still me and I'm not just like letting the AI do all the art. And but it's faster, and I'm able to continue to build a world and tell a story without spending a month on a single piece. You know?
Absolutely. Like the tools definitely, it goes back to kind of what we were saying earlier about like the intuitiveness of the tools having to catch up to the artist, or meet the artist where they are. I truly believe in
Yeah,
that. What you said that you have a couple people coming in to work in your new studio with you, is that right?
yeah. Just a couple of friends from the crypto art space, and I've got plans for a big exhibition, and I'm developing a new strange mixed reality sculpture concept. And I need help to not only help me sort of create this thing, but I also miss. I used to like I say, I used to run a studio, and I kind of miss, after 3 years on my own in this room, miss the banter and bouncing ideas back and forth with people in real time and trying to build something with other people. So I'm going to be doing that. But the bit of art from my past that I'm most proud of in the last couple of years was the Cyclops project, which was on Nifty Gateway, where I 3D printed and cast my sculptures in bronze, and they have AR capabilities, and they sent a curated show of 3D art from different artists to the collectors. You look at the camera, this is the Cyclops, and it's like cold cast bronze resin. And so there was a show that came through to the collectors via the sculpture, and I'm going to be using microprocessors and screens and capacitive buttons and microphones to do an evolution of that. That instead of just a sticker, it's actually a little tiny computer inside a sculpture on the wall. And it's quite ambitious, and it's kind of a bit scary at the moment, but I'm going to try and create that. And I need other people to help me with it, because it's just, there's so many layers to it to get it to work. But I want it to be an augmented reality wall mounted magic mirror type thing that will eventually, again, probably utilize AI, and you'll be able to have a conversation with it or whatever. But that's sort of way down the line. But literally today, I've been putting desks together and moving my computer in and battling with the Wi-Fi and sort of just starting that process right now. It's
Totally
fun.
understand. That sounds cool though, like what you just explained. I'm not gonna try to recap it, but it sounds really cool. And bronze casting. Bronze casting is really fun too. That's a really nice just it's a nice material to work with. Bronze, it feels
Yeah,
good. Nice weight with bronze.
yeah,
I like
these
the
are really nice and
materiality of it.
heavy.
Yeah, the heaviness of
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I got a couple bronze objects, and I'm always like, if there's ever an intruder in my house, I think I'd pick up one of these.
Yeah, yeah. That would be.
So
Yeah. I'd be proud of it. I'd be proud of it for helping me beat off an intruder. I've got three of these, and they're about the size of a cricket ball as well, or baseball.
Yeah. Brutal. Um,
Yeah.
well, that's cool to hear that you're scaling. You know, I'm in a similar position of beginning to ask for help, which is not easy. I think for an artist, probably
No.
similar to you, it's not easy to ask for help. It's not easy to like relinquish any control at all, really. Sometimes as an artist, but you got to do it if you have these bigger ideas, which obviously you do. You have to employ help, time, all that kind of stuff. So good for you. Kudos for doing it. It sounds like you got big things ahead. And you said that it's going to take a while, and been comparing this all to like, just like the evolution in general of the evolution of us now, and that took a long fucking time too. So I mean, it's fine, right? You got a ways to go. So I don't want to take up any more of your time. Really, it sounds like you're really busy. You want to put together some more desks and shit. But I do want to ask, like, what do you got that you want to shout out? Like, is there any drops or projects that you want to put eyes on? Direct our viewership here towards where you'd like them to go to find out more about what you're up to right now. But it does sound like you're working on the studio a lot, and I know that's already a full time. So I don't mean to put you on the spot about anything else. But if there is anything, please let us know.
No, that's cool. That's cool. I will be reaching out soon because I want these real sort of real world IRL portal things to be a means of sharing other people's artwork as well. So they essentially there'd be like a hologram delivery device using AR. So anyone who's interested in that can reach out. I don't know how I'm going to fund this. Like at the moment, I'm just like forking out loads of money. I'm not making any art that I can sell quickly. So I've got nothing happening in the short term in terms of drops really, although I'm tempted to do some text to video stuff that I've been doing on the side for a while. But no, I've got two major things. The main thing, like I don't think it's going to be until the autumn before I've got anything to like put a show on, but I do want to do that in London. If anyone can help with that sort of thing, that'd be wonderful. But yeah, the big show is going to be the main thing. I'm taking a bit of I'm reinvesting the money I made from selling my art over the last couple of years into the business. I say into the Metageist as a studio, and to help fund help other people as well. So that like paying other people wages to sort of support me, and this is really nice as well, keeping other people afloat. But and then the other thing is I've got a whole other world that I could talk about for hours, which is another world building project. But that's going to be probably a deck building like board game. And I'm going to be using AI for that, probably for the initially creating the artwork. But then there will be either a Kickstarter type thing or an NFT collection to help fund that. But that's I've got this world I've been sort of drawing since I was like a teenager that is essentially like humans living at the bottom of the food chain, and I'm trying to sort of speculate how humans would survive in a world where would they respect their environment better if they were bottom of the food chain. But actually it's sort of it just equates to 6 different species of humans that have symbiotic relationships with insects, and they ride them and they hunt them, and they're all like they're killed by them. And I'm actually like creating with a friend of mine who's like a board game expert, like 300 different cards and all these stats for all these different characters. So at some point soon, I'm going to be doing a shout out. I'm going to be trying maybe to get some fun, like get some money through an NFT collection or something to sort of help finalize it so I can get it made. But I'm also going to want play testers. So if anybody is interested in play testing a game based on spider riders, then there's also that. It's nerdy as hell,
Bro,
but
no, I mean, a board game is insane. It seems like you're really into this world building thing, like the board game thing sounds like a whole nother world. Like I think you said it yourself, but like world building's big for you, huh? Like this idea.
since I was a tiny kid, I was that kid in the playground, just like telling stories and making things up and basically believing it until like early teens. I was the kid. I was like playing make believe, and now I realize when I'm in a position like I am, like crypto art is such an enabler of the imagination, and I've just sort of got back into that, and I love this. I do want to build immersive worlds, and that can be done with technology, but it can also just be done with storytelling. You just need people to like join you, and I feel like a game is a nice mechanism for getting other people to sort of dip their toe in for an hour and be part of this world that you've created. So yeah, behind everything I'm doing, I think that's what it is. It's
That's
just the
amazing.
individual artworks are quite slow and sporadic, but there's a bigger picture.
Were you into like role-playing games and shit?
Weirdly enough, I actually played my first game of Dungeons and Dragons 2 years ago, and I don't know if I don't know why I hadn't like spent playing the last 30 years playing it. It was just like I don't know. I did Games Workshop and things like that, so a little bit of role playing, but not really. But now I just have there's a bunch of mates. We get drunk, we sit around a table, and we do this collaborative storytelling. It's D&D, but it's a really good night out. It's a really good fun. So
Yeah.
it's
I've
new
never
to
played
me.
myself, but it sounds
Oh
like it would be up your alley. There's this
yeah,
what is the book called? The vocalist of this band, I don't even like the band, but there's a band like an indie band called the Mountain Goats. In the
oh
I think
yeah,
it's yeah, that's it. The
yeah.
vocalist of that band is a writer. I can't remember his name. He's an author, but he's a really good author too. And I think it's his debut novel is about a dude who has a role-playing game that's all done through the mail, where it's like he puts an ad in the back of a magazine, and then people write with like an envelope and say something, and then he writes them back like the next move and includes like whatever, and like he has this whole followership of people playing this game that's all mail based, and it really got me thinking of just like world building and these in like that's the most analog world building that you can imagine.
Yeah.
And I was reading this. I think I was actually reading it coming back from London from Proof of People, and that was just proxying that to the world building of the metaverse and how opposite they were, but how fulfilling they both can be to the people participating.
hmm
Because somebody participating in that mail game, that world is just as real as somebody putting on a VR helmet.
Yeah.
Because imagination, it's just that powerful. So I think it's amazing that you're interested in both sides of the world building, not just, metaverse as like the hot new thing. It's more
hmm
like the metaverse and the VR thing and Web3 in general is more like an augmentation of
Yeah.
your pre-existing interest, and it can help you, and not just a fad. So I love it,
Yeah.
man. Like
Thank you.
sounds like you're in your lane right now.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, it's been up and down definitely, but I'm feeling really inspired now, and I'm a big believer in like paying attention to the cycles of the year and nature as well. And I had like a really nice hibernating winter, and I don't regret that at all. But now like it's literally like the first week of spring, and it feels like the time to just go right. I'm going to open the studio. We're going to get the guys in. We're going to start making stuff. Feeling very positive about that as well. And I do really want it to be very much pulling other people in for the ride. So this real world event of some sort, I want that to be tied into the whole thing somehow, so that it isn't just an artist saying like, "This is my thing. Look at my stuff." It's more just like, "Look what we've done together, and look how you think that you can become part of this," and all that sort of stuff. Um, yeah, there was a ARG gaming. This guy in London. There's a thing where you've got an envelope in the post with a target, like a photo and some information and a water pistol, and they got sent out to like 100 people. And over the next month, you had to hunt down your real target, but you knew roughly where they lived and roughly where they worked. So that you'd end up like on the tube in London with a loaded water pistol for weeks on end, just like, and then because you might have to defend yourself if you get attacked. So I love all that sort of stuff. Like it's a slow moving, really immersive because you might get shot in the back of the head at any point in your day to day because everyone's an assassin and everyone's got a target. Yeah, I'd love to do that sort of stuff
And
as
the
well. I
like
mean, you could,
slow moving is you said slow
yeah,
moving, and that is slow moving. But isn't that all like that's also like such like that's augmented reality in a way where
yeah,
you're basically just putting a
absolutely,
layer onto your everyday life, which
hundred
is
percent,
great.
yeah,
I love
100%.
that. And I also want to mention like how cool it is to hear you reinvesting um in a meaningful way. You know, uh I don't know how many people are doing that or whatever with like their crypto proceeds or whatever. I know I'm doing that like in myself where I'm like producing in my own show and putting on a big event and like, I'm funding all of it myself, but that's my way of reinvesting that. But it sounds like you're really doing something meaningful and reinvesting um in your own future and then trying to help others as well and bringing them into the fold like you said. So like kudos to you. That's fucking dope. Very, very cool. So
Thanks.
anybody listening who interested in getting in on that shit, best way of reaching you would be Twitter,
Probably
maybe?
Twitter.
Or do
Yeah,
you tell
yeah.
us?
Yeah, Metageist on Twitter and on Instagram. And I did a lot of onboarding people in the first year or so, and because I really saw a way in which people could actually like be supported as artists with crypto art. So I did lots of curating shows as well, and that's something that I will do. Whatever my sort of exhibition becomes, there will be a show, there will be a group exhibition of some sort as well. So yeah, if
Awesome.
anybody like thinks this sounds cool or it's something that they sort of like relate to, then yeah, definitely reach out, say hi, see if you want to get involved.
Very cool, man. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. I thank you very
Yeah,
much for your
thank you.
time, and informative to me as well. I'm actually going to be putting on the VR helmet for the first time in like a month, maybe, or a couple months, and checking out some of the stuff you talked about at the beginning of all this. But I'm definitely going to be paying attention to everything you've got going on, man. This has been a really
Thank
educational
you.
and informative and fun conversation. So keep in touch, and everybody follow Metageist on Twitter. Until next time, peace out, everybody.
Thank you very much. See you later.